important that I explain why this evidence is so important for showing the existence of a creative power, and even an intelligent creative power outside of our universe. And I think I can explain this in 4 simple steps. Step 1, if we can prove an absolute beginning of physical reality, well then that means prior to that beginning point, physical reality would not have existed. In other words, physical reality would have been nothing. Absolutely nothing. Step 2. Now, there's one thing that we know about nothing, and that is it's simply nothing. And don't think of nothing as empty space, because empty space is dimensional and orientable, and you can have more or less of empty space. But you cannot have more or less of nothing. Why? Because it's simply nothing. So don't try and sneak something into nothing. Just let nothing be what it is. Nothing. And so now we come to step 3. We know something else about nothing. It can only do nothing. You know, the great philosophers have always said, from nothing, only nothing comes. So this presents us with a huge paradox, which leads us to step 4. If prior to the beginning of physical reality, it was literally nothing, whether we're talking about a universe, a multiverse, or whatever it is, it could not have moved itself from nothing to something. Because remember, the only thing that nothing can do is nothing. And so what's the inevitable conclusion? If it could not have moved itself from nothing to something, well then something else would have to have done so. And that something else has to be transcendent, beyond a universe or even a multiverse, and actually have the power to create ex nihilo, from nothing. So what I would contend is that physics has reached a point of showing with a high degree of probability that physical reality had an absolute beginning, prior to which it was nothing, which implies that some reality transcending physical reality exists and has the power to simply give existence to physical reality itself. Now, let's begin looking at the first kind of evidence for God from physics, namely the 2003 space-time geometry proof of Drs. Arvind Borde, Alexander Vilenkin, and Alan Guth. But before I walk you through the 6 steps of the proof, I'd like to give you just a brief overview of the proof by way of introduction. The proof was based upon an essential discovery in 1923 by the Belgian priest, Father Georges Lemaitre, that actually led to the Big Bang Theory. And his discovery was that the greater distance a galaxy is from us, the greater its recessional velocity is. Now, Drs. Borde, Vilenkin, and Guth would use Lemaitre's principle to show that the further back we go into the past, the greater would be the relative velocities of projectiles moving through space. And this led them to an astounding conclusion, and that is, at some time in the past, those relative velocities of projectiles would have to have been at the speed of light. Now, as you well know, the speed of light is the highest possible velocity in the universe. And as I'll explain later, it really doesn't matter what the highest possible velocity is, because we're always going to have an upper limit velocity in any universe. So what this means is that we're always going to reach a point where time cannot proceed back any further. In other words, a beginning. A beginning of any universe or multiverse, a finite time ago. Now think about that. We have a proof to reach the beginning of any universe or multiverse a finite time ago. My dear friends, that is going to point to an absolute beginning of physical reality itself, which, remember, we've already said indicates the existence of a transcendent creator. All right, so let's proceed to step one of our proof. Father Georges Lemaitre discovered that galaxies are not traveling in pre-existent space, but that the space between the galaxies is actually growing, expanding, or stretching, very much like the elastic on a balloon that stretches as it's inflated with air.